Thank you very much, Quickshot. I'm Eefje Shock supporter, joined here at the desk by the Unicorns of Love players Power of Evil and Vizicsacsi, as well as our guest for the week, former jungler for Fnatic and world champion Lauri Cyanide Hapanen. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you very much for joining me. Lauri, what's it been like not being a pro player for the last couple of months?
I'm very much enjoying my retirement. I have a lot of free time to do whatever I want, mostly just streaming and doing YouTube, and there's absolutely no stress, so loving it so far.
Talking about stress, these two guys in the Unicorns of Love, you guys had your very first week in the LCS. Power of Evil, how do you reflect on week one? Great Cinder performance, but Orianna didn't seem that on point.
Yeah, I just think that I didn't find my game in the second game against Elements. I had a lot of pressure on me. They tried to dive me nearly the whole game. I didn't find into the game, and obviously I can't deny I had bad Orianna ult.
Well, there's always next time, of course. A lot of games left to come. Vizicsacsi, yesterday at Primetime League, we got to listen to your comms during a team fight. I gotta say, it was very, very chaotic. I don't know if you heard that clip, but how did that go? Because it seemed like nobody actually had a clear call, but you still made it work.
Yeah, I had the pleasure to listen to it as well. It sounded really chaotic listening back to it, but during the game we are so focused that we actually understand the calls. And if everyone just calls their summoners or anything like that, we know what to do in a team fight.
Yeah, and you actually won that team fight impressively and that game, so it definitely works. Cyanide, looking back at last week, what for you was the most impressive performance and why?
I think it must be Fnatic. Like, they have all these new members going in, still their team play was fantastic, and they have the language barrier, didn't seem to bother them one bit. So I'd say Fnatic with the aggressive playstyle.
All right, you guys, after having played your first game and seeing the first teams, where do you think you can end up in the standings realistically in your first split, Power?
I think we can reach top 5. It depends in the next weeks. I think we will still try to find ourselves in the LCS and try to improve as good as we can and hopefully hit top 5.
Finally, you're up against Giants here in your first game of the day, and Werlip has been so strong for that team. Vizicsacsi, how do you think that's going to play out?
We will definitely look to give him less opportunities to shine on the top lane. So I think we will be able to handle him.
All right, we will see that. Now we're going to turn to you guys at home. Hop on Twitter and tell us what champion pick surprised you the most in week one and why. Cyanide?
I was most surprised by Gnar. Not because he's weak, but the opposite, he's so strong, I think he should be banned away, especially with the Gnar 1 combo just dominating so far. So I expect to see some more Gnar bans.
Vizicsacsi.
I will actually say Olaf here. I didn't really expect to see any Olafs during the first week, and yet there were like several players bringing him in with quite successful games as well.
Well, I would agree the Olaf is quite surprising. Reignover played a fantastic Olaf, and I just think in general he's really strong. And I would just add the Cassiopeia, which is in this new patch pretty strong and pretty scary, so I can imagine there will be more bans on her.
Yeah, incredibly scary indeed. Remember to send your responses to @LOL Esports and use that hashtag LCS to stay in the conversation throughout the day. Now let's get into our first matchup of the day, H2K versus Meet Your Makers. Both teams looking for their first win of the year. Only one will find it today. Starting off with H2K last week, 0-2, losing to Fnatic and the Copenhagen Wolves. And especially that game versus the Copenhagen Wolves, Lauri, they started off so strong and they just couldn't keep that going.
Yeah, I think H2K had some problems with their wave control. Like, they were trying to force Baron when their lanes were getting pushed, and they really didn't get anything from it. I think in the future they should like have better wave control, push out the side lanes, then go to Baron and extend the lead to the enemy jungle, just ward everything and pick them off while they come. And if they don't come, you get Baron, and if they do come, they will lose the turrets to the minions alone, or at least lose the farm.
Vizicsacsi, would you say this problems with late-game decision-making, that's typically something you also recognize as being a problem going from Challenger to LCS?
Yeah, that's definitely a problem, but I think after a few weeks playing in the LCS, you can just get used to it and improve a lot in this situation.
All right, let's actually take a look at the lineup for H2K on the blue side. In the top lane, Odawamne. In the jungle, Lulex. In the mid lane, Ryu. At AD, Yarnan. Support, Voidal. And their coach, of course, is Prowly. We touched already on the game and the late game decision making for them coming in, maybe focusing a little bit on individual performances. Ryu coming in as the new mid laner for that team. He statistically was down about 2.5 CS at 10 minutes on average last week, 15 by 20 minutes. That is not ideal. Power of Evil, what are your general impressions playing versus him?
Well, after I played a lot of scrims against him, I think he's individually quite strong, but in the LCS he couldn't show it yet. I would say that he has a lot of potential to show it in the next weeks, and I think he will be good. Yeah, he will be good.
What would be the main thing for them to change coming into this week, Cyanide, for H2K?
Like I said, the bad wave control. Also, the team fighting was poor. Like, Ryu was doing some really weird stuff with Cassidy, like going into aggressive or not going in at all. Hjarnan just not grouping. They had a couple of fights that they won, 4 versus 5. And I think if Hjarnan just had been there at the right position, they could have just cleaned the entire team and taken Baron or whatever the decisive battle they really needed to win that game. So. Yep.
Turning to the red side of the rift, their opponents are Meteor Makers. Let's take a look at their lineup. In the top lane, Mimer. In the jungle, Horo. At mid, Blizer. At AD, Mr. Owls. Support, Nisbet. And their coach, of course, Yamato Cannon. 0-2 the first week versus SK Gaming and Giants. They did have Blizer coming in there basically the day before the LCS started, so that must have been hard for them. What did you think about their addition, Horo, in the jungle? How did he fare?
Well, when he was playing Olaf, he was very unimpressive, invisible really, but with Lee Sin he did a really great game, keeping his team in the game. Even when bot lane got completely decimated 2 versus 2, because of Horo they managed to get some lead in the top lane, and he was the only reason why they didn't just FF at 20.
Another person that we were keeping our eyes on was Mimer for MYM in that top lane. He had grown into this fantastic top laner who could carry the team. He didn't quite get going. And actually our featured matchup for today is Mimer versus Odoamne in that top lane. Vizicsacsi, if you had to grade both of the top laners, how do you think that will play out?
It really depends on their mindset, actually. Mimer was really solid last year in the LCS. So if he can just go back to that performance, he will be totally fine against Odoamne, who is a very aggressive player. So it really depends on how he approaches the game. For example, against Fnatic, he played Irelia and went really, really deep for Fab even a lot of times. So he needs to focus more on the game, and then he can maybe beat Mimer as well.
All right, we will see how that one plays out. Thank you very much for joining us. And with the stage set, it's time to send it over to the caster desk as the teams load up for Champ Select.